In a small, peaceful town surrounded by lush green hills and thick woods, Sarah Callahan had become a familiar face. A skilled K-9 handler with years of experience in the military, she was known for her calm demeanor and incredible bond with her two German shepherds, Rex and Blitz. These weren't ordinary dogs. They were highly trained military animals capable of performing tasks that most people could only dream of teaching their pets. From tracking scents to protecting their handler, Rex and Blitz were loyal, intelligent, and disciplined. Sarah's current assignment brought her to this quiet town, where her job was simple: ensure the safety of the area while maintaining her routine training sessions with her dogs. Every day, she would take Rex and Blitz out for exercises near an open field close to the edge of town. It was a perfect spot, quiet, spacious, and away from distractions, or so she thought. One sunny afternoon, as Sarah worked through drills with her dogs, the distant rumble of motorcycle engines broke the tranquility. At first, it sounded like just another group of bikers passing through town, but soon enough, they pulled into the clearing not far from where Sarah was training. The group consisted of about 6 or 7 men, all dressed in leather jackets covered in patches, their bikes gleaming under the bright sun. They parked their motorcycles in a loose circle and began unpacking coolers and snacks, clearly planning to spend some time there. At first, Sarah paid them no mind, focusing instead on her work. But it didn't take long before the bikers noticed her. One of them pointed toward her direction, laughing loudly. "Hey, check it out," he shouted to his friends. "Looks like we got ourselves a little show here. A girl and her puppies." The comment drew chuckles from the rest of the group. Another biker chimed in. "What do you think those mutts can do? Fetch sticks." Sarah tried to ignore them, continuing her commands. "Rex, heel," she said firmly, and the dog obeyed instantly, moving smoothly beside her. Blitz sat perfectly still, his ears perked up, watching every move around him. But the bikers weren't done. Their mocking grew louder, more pointed. "Come on, sweetheart," one of them called out, leaning back against his bike. "If you're such a tough handler, why don't you show us what your dogs are made of?" Another man added, shaking his head mockingly. "Yeah, I bet they couldn't even stop a squirrel." Sarah clenched her jaw, but kept her composure. She knew better than to let their words get to her. Instead, she focused on her dogs, running them through their paces with precision. Still, the bikers' laughter echoed across the field, making it hard to concentrate. Some of them started mimicking her commands, shouting fake orders at Rex and Blitz, trying to confuse them. But the dogs remained unshaken, responding only to Sarah's voice. Despite their arrogance, Sarah couldn't help but notice something about the bikers. They seemed bored. Maybe they were looking for entertainment, or perhaps they genuinely believed she wouldn't rise to their taunts. Either way, their mockery wasn't going unnoticed. As the minutes passed, Sarah realized she had 2 choices: walk away and avoid confrontation, or stand her ground and prove them wrong. Deep down, she knew her dogs were extraordinary. They'd been trained to handle far worse situations than a few jeering bikers. And truthfully, part of her wanted to teach these men a lesson, not out of anger, but because she believed in showing respect to everyone, including animals. With that thought, Sarah decided she wouldn't back down. Little did the bikers know, they were about to witness something unforgettable. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's relationship with the bikers grew into something neither she nor they could have predicted. What began as an uneasy truce quickly turned into a genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. The bikers, once skeptical of her abilities, now looked at Sarah as someone who commanded not only the loyalty of her dogs, but also their admiration. In turn, Sarah found herself enjoying their company more than she expected. The group started showing up regularly during her training sessions with Rex and Blitz, though this time, they came with curiosity rather than mockery. They brought snacks, homemade sandwiches wrapped in foil or cold sodas packed in coolers, and sat quietly on the sidelines, watching intently as Sarah put the dogs through their paces. Sometimes, one of them would ask questions. How do you teach them to ignore distractions? Or, what's the hardest thing they've ever done? Sarah answered patiently, explaining the intricacies of K9 training while demonstrating techniques that left the bikers even more impressed. One day, Tank surprised her by showing up with a small notebook. "I figured I'd write some stuff down," he admitted sheepishly, flipping open the pages filled with scribbled notes about dog commands and safety tips. "You know, just in case I ever meet another handler or something. Don't want to make the same mistakes twice." Sarah couldn't help but laugh softly at his earnestness. "That's smart," she said, giving him an approving nod. "Not everyone takes the time to learn from their mistakes." Encouraged by her response, the bikers decided to take things a step further. They asked Sarah if she'd be willing to teach them basic dog handling skills, not because they planned to train their own animals. Most didn't even own pets, but because they wanted to understand how to interact safely with working dogs in the future. Sarah agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to spread awareness about the importance of respecting all animals, not just military-trained ones. Their lessons became a regular event. Under Sarah's guidance, the bikers practiced simple commands like stay and come, using treats borrowed from her stash as rewards. At first, their attempts were clumsy. One biker accidentally dropped half the treats on the ground, sending Blitz into a frenzy of sniffing, but they improved quickly under her patient instruction. By the end of each session, there was laughter, camaraderie, and a growing sense of accomplishment among the group. In return, the bikers offered to teach Sarah a few things of their own. One weekend, they invited her to join them for a ride along the scenic mountain roads surrounding the town. Though hesitant at first, she wasn't exactly a motorcycle enthusiast. Sarah accepted the invitation, eager to experience something new. With Rex and Blitz safely secured in her truck, she climbed onto the back of Tank's bike, gripping the seat tightly as he revved the engine. The thrill of the wind rushing past her face and the breathtaking views of the countryside left Sarah exhilarated. When they returned to the clearing later that afternoon, she thanked them sincerely. "That was actually really fun," she admitted, brushing dust off her jeans. "Maybe I'll stick to four wheels, though." Her comment sparked laughter, breaking the ice even further. Over the following days, the bikers continued to include her in their activities, whether it was helping repair bikes in their makeshift garage or sharing stories around a campfire late into the night. Through these interactions, Sarah discovered layers to their personalities she hadn't anticipated. Beneath their tough exteriors, they were kind-hearted individuals who valued loyalty and community, a mindset that aligned surprisingly well with her own principles as a handler. As the weeks passed, the unlikely alliance between Sarah and the bikers proved beneficial for everyone involved. Together, they formed a unique partnership, combining their strengths to keep the area safe. The bikers patrolled the roads on their motorcycles, keeping an eye out for anything suspicious, while Sarah and her dogs handled patrols on foot. Their collaboration turned what had been a tense standoff into a model of teamwork and trust. By the time Sarah's temporary assignment neared its end, she realized she'd gained more than just professional experience in the small town. She'd made friends, people who had once doubted her, but now stood firmly by her side. And as she prepared to leave, she knew the bond she'd formed with the bikers would stay with her long after she drove away, with Rex and Blitz riding shotgun beside her. The day finally arrived when Sarah's assignment in the small town came to an end. Her truck was packed, with Rex and Blitz resting comfortably in the back seat, their heads leaning out the open windows as they panted happily. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine trees and fresh earth, but Sarah couldn't help feeling a pang of sadness. Over the past few weeks, this place and its people had become more than just a temporary stop for her. It had turned into something meaningful, a chapter she would remember fondly. As she prepared to leave, the bikers showed up at her doorstep, surprising her with a heartfelt send-off. Tank led the group, his usual bravado replaced by genuine warmth. "We didn't get you anything fancy," he admitted, handing her a small wooden plaque engraved with the image of a German shepherd and the words, respect, and loyalty etched below it. But we wanted to give you something to remember us by. Sarah accepted the gift with a grateful smile, her eyes softening as she traced the engraving with her fingers. This means a lot, she said sincerely. More than you know. The rest of the group chimed in, each adding their own farewell. One biker handed her a thermos filled with coffee, insisting it was for the road. Another gave her a folded map of the area, marked with all their favorite spots, joking that she might want to come back someday. Even the quieter members of the group found ways to express their gratitude, nodding respectfully or simply shaking her hand. Before heading out, Sarah decided to leave them with one last lesson. Not for themselves, but for others they might encounter in the future. She gathered the group near her truck and spent a few minutes teaching them how to recognize signs of stress or aggression in dogs. Not everyone will have the patience to explain things like I did, she told them. So if you see someone treating a dog badly, or even just misunderstanding what it needs, you'll know how to step in and help. The bikers listened carefully, soaking up every word. They promised her they'd pass along the knowledge, ensuring that her influence would continue long after she left. As they stood together under the clear blue sky, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. These men, who had once mocked her and her dogs, were now advocates for the very animals they used to underestimate. When it was time to go, Sarah climbed into the driver's seat, Rex and Blitz wagging their tails excitedly beside her. She rolled down the window and waved one final goodbye. "Take care of yourselves," she called out. "And thanks for everything." The bikers raised their hands in farewell, some saluting playfully while others shouted parting jokes. "Don't forget about us," Tank yelled, grinning widely. "Next time you're here, we expect another ride on those bikes." Sarah laughed, giving them a thumbs up before starting the engine. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror, watching the bikers grow smaller in the distance. Their figures blurred into the landscape, but their impact remained vivid in her mind. She thought about how far they'd come, from mocking strangers to trusted allies, and realized that sometimes change happens in unexpected ways. Back in the clearing where it all began, the bikers lingered for a moment, staring at the empty space where Sarah's truck had been. For a group that prided itself on toughness, they weren't ashamed to admit they felt a twinge of loss. Tank broke the silence first, clapping his hands together. "All right, let's head back," he said, though his tone lacked its usual edge. "She left us with a job to do, didn't she?" As they mounted their motorcycles and roared off in different directions, the story of Sarah Callanan and her extraordinary dogs spread through the town like wildfire. Locals recounted tales of the female K9 handler who had taught a rowdy gang of bikers humility and respect. Parents used her example to teach their children about kindness and understanding, while animal lovers praised her dedication to her craft. Sarah's legacy lived on, not just in the lessons she taught, but in the hearts of those whose lives she touched. Driving toward her next destination, Sarah reflected on the journey behind her. She knew she'd missed the town and its quirky inhabitants, especially the bikers who had proven that even the toughest exteriors could hide good intentions. But as Rex rested his chin on her shoulder and Blitz let out a contented sigh, she reminded herself of the truth she'd always believed. Loyalty and respect transcend boundaries. And sometimes, all it takes is a little patience and two remarkable dogs to bring people together. By the time Sarah wrapped up the final demonstration, the mood in the clearing had shifted dramatically. The bikers who had arrived mocking and dismissive were now watching her every move with a mix of admiration and humility. They weren't just impressed by Rex and Blitz, they were genuinely curious about the bond between Sarah and her dogs. As she gave the command for both dogs to sit side by side, their tails thumping gently against the ground in unison, the group erupted into spontaneous applause. All right, Tank said, clapping his hands together with a sheepish grin. "We get it. You and your dogs are the real deal." He glanced at his friends, then back at Sarah. "Guess we owe you an apology." Sarah smiled faintly, though her expression remained calm and professional. She knew better than to let her guard down completely. Respect was earned, not given freely, but she appreciated the gesture. "Apologies aren't necessary," she replied. "Just remember that working animals like Rex and Blur deserve respect. They're not here for entertainment or jokes." The bikers nodded solemnly, some murmuring agreements under their breath. One of them, a lean man with a scruffy beard and sunglasses perched on his head, stepped forward hesitantly. "Can I ask something?" he said, glancing nervously at the dogs. When Sarah nodded, he continued, "How long does it take to train them like this? I mean, they're incredible." Sarah chuckled softly, sensing the sincerity behind the question. "Years," she answered honestly. "It takes years of consistent training, patience, and trust building. These guys didn't start out perfect. They had to learn everything from scratch, just like any other dog. But what makes them special is their drive to work and protect. Not all dogs have that instinct." Another biker chimed in, pointing at Rex. "And they only listen to you, right? Like nobody else can boss them around." "That's correct," Sarah confirmed. "They're trained to respond only to my voice and commands. It's part of their discipline. It ensures they stay focused and don't get confused in high-pressure situations." This revelation seemed to leave a lasting impression on the group. Several of them exchanged thoughtful looks, clearly reflecting on how much effort and dedication went into creating such a strong partnership. For men who prided themselves on toughness and independence, seeing someone like Sarah command such loyalty and precision from her dogs was eye-opening. Tank, still nursing his bruised ego, but visibly humbled, cleared his throat before speaking again. "Look, we messed up earlier," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "We shouldn't have doubted you or your dogs. They're amazing, and so are you. No hard feelings." Sarah tilted her head slightly, studying him for a moment. Then she extended her hand. "No hard feelings," she agreed. Tank shook her hand firmly, his grip strong but respectful. The rest of the group followed suit, each offering their own apologies and words of praise. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting golden light across the field, the conversation turned lighter. The bikers invited Sarah to join them for dinner at the local diner, insisting she share more stories about her time in the military and her experiences as a K9 handler. At first, she hesitated. Her assignment required focus, and she wasn't used to socializing with strangers. But something about their genuine curiosity won her over. Over plates of greasy burgers and fries, Sarah opened up about her journey. She told them about the rigorous training programs she'd completed, the challenges of working in combat zones, and the deep connection she shared with her dogs. In return, the bikers shared tales of their own adventures on the road, their love for motorcycles, and the camaraderie that came with being part of a tight-knit group. Despite their differences, they found common ground in their mutual respect for loyalty, teamwork, and hard work. By the end of the meal, the atmosphere had transformed entirely. What started as hostility had blossomed into friendship, or at least the beginnings of one. As Sarah stood to leave, Tank stopped her with a raised hand. "Hey, if you ever need backup or anything while you're in town, let us know," he offered sincerely. "We're not great at handling dogs, but we can keep an eye on things if you want." Sarah smiled, touched by the unexpected offer. "I'll keep that in mind," she said, and for the first time since arriving in the small town, she felt a sense of belonging, not just as a handler, but as someone who had earned the respect of those who once underestimated her. The bikers' laughter grew louder as they continued to mock Sarah and her dogs. One of them, a burly man with a scruffy beard and a leather vest covered in patches, stood up from his seat on the bike and walked closer to where Sarah was training Rex and Blitz. He crossed his arms over his chest, smirking confidently. "All right, lady," he said, raising his voice so everyone could hear him. "You keep acting like your dogs are some kind of superstars, but we don't see anything impressive yet. Prove it. If they're really as good as you say, show us something worth watching." His friends cheered him on, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Another biker chimed in, "Yeah, come on. Let's see what these military dogs can do. Bet they can't even sit without messing it up. Sarah paused for a moment, her expression calm but firm. She glanced at Rex and Blitz, who were standing attentively by her side, their eyes locked onto hers. The dogs hadn't reacted to any of the taunts or jeers. They were completely focused on their handler, just as they'd been trained to be. Sarah knew this was more than just a challenge. It was an opportunity to demonstrate not only her dog's abilities, but also the respect that should be given to working animals. Without saying a word, Sarah turned to face the group of bikers. Her silence seemed to unsettle them slightly, though they tried not to show it. Finally, she spoke, her tone steady and composed. "Fine," she said. "If you want proof, I'll give it to you. But remember, you asked for this." The bikers exchanged glances, some grinning while others looked skeptical. One of them leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Oh yeah. What's the deal? You gonna make them jump through hoops or something?" Sarah ignored the sarcasm and began issuing commands to Rex and Blitz. First, she ordered them into a perfect heel position, walking back and forth across the field with the dogs moving in sync beside her. Their steps were precise, almost mechanical, leaving no room for error. The bikers stopped laughing for a moment, watching intently as the dogs followed every movement flawlessly. Next, Sarah tested their agility. Using a fallen tree branch and a pile of rocks nearby, she quickly set up a makeshift obstacle course. With a sharp whistle, she signaled Rex to leap over the branch and weave around the rocks. The dog responded instantly, clearing the obstacles with ease. Blitz followed right after, matching Rex's performance move for move. The bikers' expressions shifted from amusement to curiosity as they realized the dogs weren't ordinary pets. They were highly skilled athletes. One of the younger bikers muttered under his breath, "Ha, not bad." But the leader of the group, still unwilling to admit defeat, shook his head dismissively. "Big deal," he said loudly. "Any well-trained dog can do tricks. That doesn't mean they're special." Sarah raised an eyebrow, sensing the tension rising. She decided to take things a step further. Pointing to a specific area near the bikers' bikes, she commanded Rex and Blitz to guard it. "Stay here," she instructed firmly. "Don't let anyone pass." To emphasize her point, she approached the designated spot herself, pretending to act as an intruder. Instantly, both dogs sprang into action, positioning themselves between her and the imaginary threat. They growled low, their bodies tense and ready to defend. Even from a distance, the bikers could feel the intensity radiating from the dogs. It was clear that Rex and Blitz weren't playing around. They meant business. The leader of the group, now visibly intrigued, stepped forward. Okay, he said, holding up his hands. "We get it. Your dogs are smart. But what about real-world situations? Can they handle actual pressure?" Sarah nodded slowly, her confidence unwavering. "They're trained for combat scenarios," she replied. "And trust me, they won't hesitate to act if provoked." This statement caught the bikers off guard. Some of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly aware that they might have bitten off more than they could chew. Still, the leader refused to back down entirely. Instead, he smirked again, leaning casually against his bike. "Prove it," he said, his voice tinged with both bravado and uncertainty. "Let's see how tough they really are." The stage was set. The bikers had pushed too far, and now they were about to discover exactly what Sarah's dogs were capable of. As Sarah prepared for the next phase of the demonstration, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. These men had underestimated her, and soon they would learn why that had been a mistake. The tension in the air was palpable as Sarah prepared for the next demonstration. The bikers, still lounging near their motorcycles, exchanged uneasy glances. Some of them leaned forward, resting their elbows on their knees, while others crossed their arms, trying to appear nonchalant. But there was no mistaking the flicker of curiosity, and perhaps even apprehension, in their eyes. They had pushed Sarah to prove her dog's abilities, And now they were about to see what she meant when she said Rex and Blitz were trained for combat scenarios. Sarah turned to face her dogs, her voice calm but commanding. "Rex, Blitz, attention," she called out. Instantly, both German shepherds snapped into position. Standing tall and alert, their eyes locked onto hers. Their transformation from relaxed companions to disciplined soldiers was immediate and striking. Even the most skeptical biker couldn't help but sit up a little straighter, his earlier smugness fading slightly. "Let's start with control," Sarah announced, addressing the group. She walked a few steps away from the dogs before issuing the series of commands. "Sit." Both dogs dropped into perfect sitting positions, their backs straight and tails tucked neatly beside them. "Down." In unison, they lowered themselves to the ground, their movements synchronized like clockwork. "Stay." With the dogs holding their positions, Sarah took several deliberate steps backward, increasing the distance between herself and her partners. Then, she turned her back completely, walking farther away until she was nearly at the edge of the clearing. The bikers watched closely, some leaning forward to see if the dogs would break their stance. But Rex and Blitz didn't move a muscle. Their focus remained unwavering, their eyes fixed on Sarah, as though nothing else in the world existed. "Now for agility," Sarah continued, her tone steady and confident. She signaled for Blitz to follow her, leading him toward the makeshift obstacle course she created earlier. With a sharp whistle and a hand gesture, she directed the dog to leap over the fallen tree branch. Blitz cleared it effortlessly, landing gracefully on the other side. Next came the pile of rocks, which required precision and balance. Blitz wove around them with ease, his powerful body moving fluidly as he navigated the tight spaces. Meanwhile, Rex stayed behind, maintaining his guard position near the bikes. His presence alone was enough to keep the bikers quiet, their earlier mockery replaced by cautious observation. One of them muttered under his breath, "That's pretty impressive." Another nodded reluctantly, adding, "Yeah, I'll give her that. They're not messing around." When Blitz finished the course, Sarah switched roles, sending Rex through the same challenges. The second dog performed just as flawlessly, his leaps high and his turns sharp. The bikers were visibly impressed, though some tried to mask it with forced indifference. The leader of the group, however, wasn't ready to concede just yet. He stood up, brushing dirt off his jeans, and approached Sarah with a smirk. "Okay, so they can jump and run," he said, folding his arms across his chest. "But what about real-world situations? Can they handle pressure, or are they just good at following orders?" Sarah met his gaze without hesitation. "They're trained to respond to threats in high-stress environments," she explained. "Their instincts are razor-sharp, and they won't hesitate to act if they perceive danger." To demonstrate, she ordered Rex to patrol the perimeter of the clearing while keeping Blitz close by her side. As Rex moved silently along the edge of the field, his ears twitched at every sound, his nose scanning for scents. Suddenly, one of the younger bikers decided to test the dog's resolve. He grabbed a stick from the ground and tossed it toward Rex, shouting, "Fetch!" But Rex didn't budge. He ignored the stick entirely, continuing his patrol as though nothing had happened. The young biker frowned, confused. "Why isn't he fetching?" he asked, looking at his friends. Sarah stepped forward, her expression serious. "Because he doesn't take commands from anyone but me," she replied. "These dogs are loyal to a fault, and they only respond to my voice. That's part of their training." The bikers exchanged looks, realization dawning on their faces. These weren't ordinary dogs. They were elite working animals, bred and trained for discipline and protection. And they were only getting started. As Sarah prepared to push the demonstration further, she noticed the leader of the group watching her intently, his earlier arrogance giving way to something resembling respect. But there was still one thing left to prove. Could Rex and Blitz handle direct confrontation? Sarah knew the answer, and she was ready to show them. The lesson wasn't over yet. The clearing was eerily quiet after Rex released Tank, the only sounds being the distant rustle of leaves in the breeze and the faint hum of insects buzzing nearby. The bikers stood frozen, their earlier bravado completely shattered. Tank, still brushing dirt off his jacket, avoided meeting Sarah's gaze. His face was a mix of embarrassment and lingering disbelief, as though he couldn't quite process what had just happened. For a man who prided himself on toughness, being taken down by a dog, even one as impressive as Rex, was a blow to his pride. Sarah didn't gloat or rub it in. Instead, she calmly walked over to Rex, placing a reassuring hand on his back. "Good boy," she said softly, her voice steady and composed. The dog relaxed instantly, his ears perking up as he leaned into her touch. It was clear that Rex wasn't acting out of malice. He was simply doing his job, protecting his handler and responding to perceived threats exactly as he'd been trained to do. Turning to the group, Sarah addressed them directly, her tone measured but firm. "My dogs aren't here to entertain or intimidate unless provoked," she explained. "They're working animals, and they take their roles seriously. When someone steps too close or makes sudden movements, especially toward me, they see it as a potential threat. That's why Rex reacted the way he did." The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, some nodding slowly while others muttered under their breath. One of them, a wiry man with tattoos running up his arms, spoke up hesitantly. "We didn't mean anything by it," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "Just messing around, you know. Didn't think they'd actually. Well, you saw what happened." Sarah nodded, understanding where they were coming from but unwilling to let them off without learning something valuable. "I get it," she replied. "You guys were having fun, blowing off steam. But there's a difference between harmless jokes and crossing boundaries. These dogs are trained for combat zones. They don't play games. If Rex had wanted to, he could have done a lot worse than pinning Tank to the ground." Her words sent a ripple through the group. Some shifted uncomfortably, while others looked genuinely unsettled. Even Tank, who had regained most of his composure, seemed more subdued now. He glanced at Rex warily before speaking. All right, he said gruffly, holding up his hands. "You made your point. Your dogs are no joke." Sarah allowed herself a small smile, not out of triumph, but because she knew the lesson was sinking in. She gestured toward Rex and Blitz, who were now sitting quietly beside her, their postures relaxed but alert. "These two aren't just pets," she continued. "They're partners. They rely on me, and I rely on them. We trust each other completely. What you saw today isn't about showing off. It's about respect. Respect for the bond we share, and for the work they do." The bikers listened intently, their earlier mockery replaced by a newfound appreciation for what Sarah and her dogs represented. One of them, a younger guy with shaggy hair and a leather bandana, stepped forward tentatively. "So, what happens if someone accidentally steps into their space?" he asked, clearly curious but wary of another demonstration. Sarah appreciated his honesty. "It depends on the situation," she answered. "If it's clear there's no threat, they'll stay calm. But if someone acts aggressively or invades my personal space, they'll react accordingly. Their priority is always protection." Tank chimed in again, his tone softer this time. "Guess we learned the hard way, huh?" He chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his head. "Never thought I'd say this, but I'm kinda glad it was just a warning." Sarah nodded, sensing the shift in their attitudes. These men weren't bad people. They were just rough around the edges, used to asserting dominance in their own way. But seeing Rex and Blitz in action had taught them a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. Strength isn't just about size or noise. It's about discipline, loyalty, and knowing when to act. As the tension eased, Sarah decided to lighten the mood. "You guys want to see something else?" she asked, smiling slightly. "Something less intense." The bikers perked up at the offer, eager to move past the awkwardness. "Sure," Tank replied, managing a grin. "But no more tackling, all right?" Sarah laughed softly, giving Rex and Blitz a reassuring pat. No tackling, she promised. Just teamwork. With that, she led the dogs through a final series of exercises, showcasing their ability to work together seamlessly. The bikers watched in awe, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. By the time Sarah called it a day, the atmosphere had transformed entirely. What started as mockery had ended in mutual respect, a lesson none of them would ever forget. The mood shifted as Sarah prepared for the next phase of her demonstration. The bikers, now quieter and more attentive, sat or stood in a loose cluster near their motorcycles. Their earlier mockery had faded, replaced by a mix of curiosity and unease. They had seen Rex and Blitz perform impressive feats of obedience and agility, but the real test was yet to come. How would these dogs react when faced with direct interaction from strangers? Sarah turned to the group, her voice calm but firm. "My dogs are trained to protect," she explained. "They won't attack unless they sense a threat, but once they do, there's no stopping them until I give the command to stand down. If anyone here wants to try interacting with them, you can, but be warned. They're not like regular pets." Her words hung in the air, causing a ripple of hesitation among the bikers. Some exchanged nervous glances, while others shifted uncomfortably on their feet. Finally, one of the younger men, emboldened by the challenge, stepped forward. He grinned awkwardly, trying to mask his uncertainty. "All right, let's see what they've got," he said, cracking his knuckles. "How hard can it be?" Sarah nodded, signaling for Blitz to stay by her side while she brought Rex closer. The dog moved with purpose, his muscles taut and his eyes sharp. To the biker, Rex looked bigger up close, his powerful frame radiating authority. For a moment, the young man hesitated, his bravado wavering. But then, determined not to back down in front of his friends, he reached out slowly, attempting to pat Rex on the head. Before his hand even got close, Rex let out a low growl, his teeth bared slightly. The biker froze, his arm hovering midair. His grin faltered, replaced by wide-eyed alarm. "Whoa, okay," he exclaimed, stepping back quickly. "I wasn't gonna hurt him." Sarah gave Rex a quick verbal cue, and the dog immediately relaxed, returning to a neutral stance beside her. She looked at the young biker, her expression serious but not unkind. "He's trained to read body language," she explained. "Even if you don't mean harm, sudden movements can trigger his protective instincts. That's why it's important to approach working dogs carefully, or not at all." The rest of the group watched silently, their earlier skepticism replaced by growing respect. One by one, a few of them tried their luck, each attempting to interact with Rex or Blitz in some way. Some tried calling the dogs over using playful tones, mimicking commands like "come" or "sit." Others tossed sticks or waved their hands, hoping to get a reaction. But the dogs remained steadfast, responding only to Sarah's voice and ignoring everyone else entirely. The leader of the bikers, who had been unusually quiet during this part of the demonstration, finally decided to step up. Known as Tank among his friends, he was the largest and most imposing member of the group, with a towering build and an attitude to match. He approached Sarah with a cocky smirk, clearly determined to prove that her dogs weren't as intimidating as she claimed. "All right, lady," Tank said, crossing his arms over his chest. "Let's see how tough your mutts really are. Can they handle someone getting too close?" Sarah studied him for a moment, sensing his defiance. "They can," she replied evenly. "But remember, you're pushing boundaries now. Are you sure you want to find out what happens next?" Tank shrugged, feigning confidence. "Sure thing. Bring it on." With a deep breath, Sarah signaled for Rex to move into a guarding position near Tank. At first, Rex simply stood still, his gaze locked onto the biker. Tank laughed nervously, waving a hand dismissively. "See, nothing to worry about." But then, without warning, Tank took a bold step forward, leaning down slightly as though testing the dog's patience. In an instant, Rex sprang into action. With lightning speed, he lunged at Tank, pinning him to the ground before he could react. Tank landed with a thud, his eyes wide with shock as Rex loomed over him, snarling softly but holding his ground without making contact. The other bikers jumped to their feet, shouting in surprise. "Whoa, whoa, easy," one of them yelled, raising his hands defensively. Sarah quickly intervened, issuing a sharp command. "Rex, release." At her voice, Rex immediately backed off, retreating to Sarah's side and resuming his calm demeanor. Tank scrambled to his feet, brushing dirt off his jacket, his face flushed with embarrassment. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with the weight of what had just happened. Finally, Tank cleared his throat, avoiding eye contact with both Sarah and the dogs. "Okay," he muttered gruffly. "Point taken." The lesson was clear. Rex and Blitz weren't just obedient companions. They were highly skilled protectors capable of handling any situation. And the bikers, once so quick to mock, were beginning to understand exactly why Sarah commanded such respect.